The day my father died, my brother looked me in the eyes and said, "Dad left the house to me." I believed him, until one letter arrived that changed everything. What I discovered inside that letter exposed a secret my brother had been hiding, and it was about to cost him everything. Dad explained that he had become suspicious of Michael before his death. Michael had been asking questions about the house, Dad's bank accounts, and his important documents. Dad wrote that he had already created a final will with his attorney, and according to that will, Michael was not getting the entire house. The property was supposed to be sold, and the money divided between us. I couldn't believe it. Then I found something else inside the envelope. A small USB drive. A note was attached to it: "Do not confront Michael yet. Take this to my attorney." I stared at the USB drive. For the first time, I realized something. Michael hadn't simply misunderstood Dad's wishes, that he might have been lying to the entire family. That I picked up my phone and searched for the lawyer's number. But before I could make the call, I heard the front door open. Michael was home. And he was walking toward Dad's bedroom. I quickly hid the letter and USB drive in my pocket. The bedroom door opened. Michael stood there. He looked at me, then he looked at the drawer. And his expression suddenly changed. "Daniel," he said quietly, "what exactly are you doing here?" I didn't answer. Because at that moment, I realized something terrifying. Michael already knew about the envelope. Michael stood in the doorway and stared at me. "What are you doing in Dad's room?" I tried to stay calm. "I came to look for some of Dad's things." He didn't move. Then he asked, "Did you find anything?" That question confirmed my suspicion. Michael knew there was something in that room. I shook my head. "No." He watched me for a few seconds, then walked away. I waited until I heard the front door close. Then I took out the USB drive. The next morning, I contacted Dad Saturday. When I told him Dad had left me a letter and a USB drive, he became completely serious. He asked me to come to his office immediately. I arrived that afternoon. The attorney opened the files on the USB drive. There were several documents. The first was Dad's actual will. It clearly stated that the house was supposed to be sold and the money divided equally between Michael and me. Then the attorney opened another file. It was a video recorded by Dad shortly before he died. I watched my father sitting in his hospital room. He looked weak, but his voice was clear. He said that he had discovered Michael was trying to pressure him into changing the property documents. Dad had refused. He also explained that he had signed his final will in front of his attorney and witnesses. Then came the biggest surprise. The attorney showed me a scanned copy of the original document. The signature Michael had shown the family looked almost identical. But it wasn't the same document. It was a fake. I couldn't believe my brother had gone that far. The attorney told me not to confront him yet. He said, "Let me handle this legally." I agreed. For the next few days, I said nothing. Michael became more confident. He started telling relatives that the house was officially his. He even began planning renovations. Then he called me. He said, "You should stop fighting this, Daniel. Dad made his choice." I calmly replied, "Maybe you're right." He laughed. "Finally, you're accepting reality." I hung up. What Michael didn't know was that the attorney had already contacted the county records office. Within days, the original will was officially verified. And then the lawyer discovered something even more important. The document Michael had presented wasn't simply different from the real will. The signature had been copied from an older document. The witnesses listed on Michael's version had also denied signing it. We finally had enough evidence, but I still didn't confront Michael. I wanted him to believe he had won. Then, one evening, Michael called a family meeting at Dad's house. He invited our relatives and announced that he was going to take full ownership of the property. Everyone sat silently. Michael stood in the living room with a smile, then he looked at me. "Daniel, I hope you finally accepted that this house belongs to me." I looked at him and smiled. "No." His smile disappeared. I placed a folder on the table. "The house doesn't belong to you." Michael stared at me, then I added, "And we have the original will, the attorney's records, and proof that the document you showed everyone was fake." The room went completely silent. Michael's face turned pale, but he still had one last thing to say: "You can't prove I did anything." I looked at him, then I placed Dad's recorded statement on the table. Actually, Dad already did. Michael stared at the screen, and for the first time since Dad's death, he realized his plan was falling apart. Michael stared at the video for several seconds. Nobody said a word. Then he suddenly laughed. "This proves nothing." I looked at him calmly. "It proves Dad knew exactly what you were doing." Michael's face changed as he turned toward the family and said, "Daniel is trying to destroy me because he wants the house." But the attorney stood up. "No. Daniel isn't the one who brought the legal documents here. I am." He placed the original will on the table, then he placed Michael's document beside it. The differences were obvious, the dates didn't match, the witnesses didn't match, and most importantly, the original document had been officially registered before Dad died. Michael started arguing. He claimed Dad had changed his mind afterward. The attorney shook his head. "There is no later legal will." Then he said something that made Michael go completely silent. "The document you presented may constitute fraud." Our relatives looked at Michael in disbelief. One of them asked, "Michael, did you actually fake Dad's will?" Michael didn't answer that. He grabbed his jacket and walked toward the door, but before leaving, he turned toward me. "You planned this." I shook my head. "No. Dad planned for the truth." A few weeks later, the legal process was completed, the fake document was rejected, the house was legally handled according to Dad's actual will. It was sold, and the money was divided equally between Michael and me, but the money wasn't the part that mattered most to me. I finally understood why Dad had left that envelope. He knew that after he was gone, Michael might try to control the situation. Dad couldn't stop him from lying, but he had made sure the truth could eventually catch up with him. Michael never apologized. In fact, for months, he blamed me for everything. He told relatives that I had humiliated him. He said I had taken away his inheritance. But I never took anything from him. I only stopped him from taking what wasn't his. Then, about 6 months later, I returned to Dad's old house one final time. The house was empty, the furniture was gone, the rooms looked strangely quiet. I walked into the backyard and sat on the old porch. That was where Dad used to drink his coffee. I pulled out the last page of his letter. There was one sentence I hadn't noticed before. It said, "Daniel, if you're sitting here reading this, remember one thing: family isn't defined by who shares your blood. It's defined by who respects your trust." I folded the letter. For the first time since Dad died, I felt peaceful. My brother had wanted the house. He had lied, manipulated the family, and risked everything just to control it, but in the end, he lost the one thing Dad had always wanted us to protect, our trust in each other. I walked away from that house knowing I could never change what Michael had done, but I could choose what I did next. And I chose to let the truth speak for itself, because sometimes the strongest revenge isn't destroying someone. It's simply making sure their own lies finally catch up with them. For the next few weeks, I thought the whole situation was finally over. The house had been sold, the money had been divided, and Michael had disappeared from my life. I honestly thought that was the end. Then one afternoon, I received a call from Dad's attorney. He said, "Daniel, there's something else you need to know." I immediately felt nervous. He explained that while reviewing Dad's old records, they had discovered one more document. It was a letter Dad had written several months before his death, but this letter wasn't about the house. It was about Michael. Dad had written that he had already forgiven Michael for several mistakes he had made in the past. But he also said something heartbreaking. He wrote that he couldn't keep rescuing Michael from the consequences of his own decisions. The attorney then handed me the letter. At the bottom, Dad had written, "If Michael ever tries to take what isn't his, don't destroy him. Let the truth decide his future." I sat there quietly. For the first time, I understood why Dad had never confronted Michael himself. He didn't want revenge. He wanted us to learn the truth. A few days later, Michael contacted me. His voice sounded completely different. He wasn't angry anymore. He sounded defeated. He said, "Daniel, can we talk?" We met at a small cafe. Michael looked exhausted. He finally admitted that he had forged the document. He said he was terrified that after Dad died, he would have nothing. He thought if he owned the house, his life would finally be secured. I listened without interrupting. Then he said, "I know you hate me." I looked at him and said, "I don't hate you." He looked surprised. I continued, "But I don't trust you anymore." That hurt him more than anything else I could have said. Before we left, Michael asked, "Do you think Dad would ever forgive me?" I thought about the letter, then I said. Dad probably would have. Michael lowered his head, but forgiveness doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. We never became close again, maybe we never will, but I stopped carrying the anger that I realized something important. Michael thought he had won when he took control of Dad's house. Then he thought I had defeated him when the truth came out, but neither of those things were the real ending. The real ending was that Dad's final wish survived. The house was sold fairly, his truth was protected, and his family finally understood what he had been trying to teach us. Months later, I returned to the old property. The house was gone from our family, but I kept something much more valuable. Dad's handwritten letter. I framed it and placed it on my desk. Every time I read it, I remember the last lesson he left me: you don't always have to fight back, sometimes you just have to stay calm, protect the truth, and let the person who lied eventually expose themselves. My brother wanted revenge against the past, that he wanted the house. He wanted control, but in the end, the truth took everything he thought he had secured, and I didn't win the house. I didn't win the money. That I won something far more important. That I walked away without becoming the person my brother had become, and that was the final revenge. Not destroying him, just refusing to let his lies destroy me. I played my father's recording again. His voice was calm, but I could hear the fear in it. The property is not what they're really after. I looked at my husband. What does that mean? He didn't answer. Dad continued. Years ago, I discovered that my business partner was hiding money through the company. My heart started racing. Dad had collected evidence against him: bank records, contracts, secret transactions. Everything was stored in one hidden location. Then Dad said, if anything happens to me, the evidence will protect my daughter. The recording suddenly stopped. My husband looked at me. I know where the evidence is. Before I could ask how, someone knocked on the door. 3 times. That we froze. My phone buzzed. A message from the man outside. Give me the USB, and nobody gets hurt. My husband whispered, don't give it to him. Then my mother called. She said, the evidence isn't in the house. Your father hid it somewhere only you would remember. I suddenly remembered my childhood. Every birthday, Dad took me to the same place. An old storage room behind his company. I knew exactly where we had to go, but as we left through the back door, I noticed something terrifying. The black car was no longer outside, they were already following us. I finally knew where my father's evidence was hidden, but someone else knew too. We reached my father's old storage room before anyone else. Inside, I found the box I remembered from childhood. My hands were shaking as I opened it. There were bank records, contracts, and one final recording. It proved that my father's former business partner had been secretly moving money through the company for years, but the biggest shock was a message my father had left for me. I knew they would eventually use someone you love to reach you. I looked at my husband. He lowered his head. He had betrayed me, but he had also helped expose the people behind the plan. The police arrived with my lawyer. The evidence was enough to begin the investigation. My father's former business partner was arrested, and the fraudulent property documents were stopped. My husband and I ended our marriage. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally understood that trust can't survive on lies. My sister apologized. My mother admitted she had been secretly protecting my father's company. And the property remained mine. Months later, I returned to my father's office. I opened his final letter. It said, never let someone else's betrayal convince you that you're not worth trusting. I finally understood. My husband thought he was using me. My father's business partner thought he could take everything. They all believed I was too trusting to discover the truth. They were wrong. Their biggest mistake wasn't betraying me. It was underestimating me. The end. I listened to the recording again. There was no doubt that it was Emily's voice. The DNA report is fake. He'll believe anything if I tell him she cheated. My entire body went cold, but the recording continued. Once he leaves her, she'll have nobody. Then we can get the child under our control. I looked at my husband. You heard this before you came here? He nodded, yes. And there's more. He played another recording. This time, Emily was speaking to Daniel. She was laughing. He actually believed the photograph. I can't believe how easy it was. I felt tears running down my face. For 12 years, I had blamed myself. I had wondered what I had done wrong. I had raised my daughter believing her father simply didn't want us, but now I knew the truth that he had been manipulated. That I turned toward my husband. Why didn't you come back when you discovered the truth? His eyes filled with tears, because by the time I discovered it, I was already too late. Then he told me something that I never expected. Daniel was still free, and he knew exactly where my daughter lived. That I immediately ran toward her room, but when I opened the door, she was gone. I listened to the recording again. There was no doubt that it was Emily's voice. The DNA report is fake. He'll believe anything if I tell him she cheated. My entire body went cold, but the recording continued. Once he leaves her, she'll have nobody. Then we can get the child under our control. I looked at my husband. You heard this before you came here? He nodded, yes. And there's more. He played another recording. This time, Emily was speaking to Daniel. She was laughing. He actually believed the photograph. I can't believe how easy it was. I felt tears running down my face. For 12 years, I had blamed myself. I had wondered what I had done wrong. I had raised my daughter believing her father simply didn't want us, but now I knew the truth that he had been manipulated. That I turned toward my husband. Why didn't you come back when you discovered the truth? His eyes filled with tears, because by the time I discovered it, I was already too late. Then he told me something that I never expected. Daniel was still free, and he knew exactly where my daughter lived. That I immediately ran toward her room, but when I opened the door, she was gone. I ran through the house calling my daughter's name, Emma. No answer. Her bed was empty, the window was open. My heart started pounding. Then I noticed something on her pillow. A small white envelope. My husband picked it up and opened it. Inside was a photograph of Daniel. On the back, there were 6 words. You should have stayed away. I could barely breathe. My husband immediately called the police, but before anyone could arrive, my phone rang. I answered. Nobody spoke. Then I heard my daughter's frightened voice, Mom. I'm okay. I started crying. Where are you? Who is with you? There was a long silence. Then she whispered, I'm with Aunt Emily. My blood ran cold. Emily came onto the phone. Don't worry. She's safe, I screamed. What do you want? Emily laughed softly. The truth. I want what should have belonged to my family 12 years ago. My husband grabbed the phone from my hand. If you hurt her, I'll make sure everyone knows what you did. Emily went silent. Then she said, you won't have to. Because tomorrow morning, the whole world is going to know. The call ended. My husband looked at me. For 12 years, we had both been fighting the wrong person. Now we finally knew who was behind everything, and this time, we were going to fight back. I looked at my husband and wiped the tears from my face. We're bringing our daughter home tonight. He nodded, but instead of calling the police immediately, he showed me something on his phone. It was a recording from Daniel. He had been watching Emily the entire time. Daniel had sent her a message, bring the girl to the old warehouse. I want the documents before midnight. My husband looked at me. That's our chance. The documents Daniel wanted were the same documents that could prove everything, Emily's fake DNA report, the money transfers, and the original recordings. That we contacted the authorities and secretly followed Emily. When she arrived at the warehouse, my daughter was sitting inside, frightened but unharmed. Emily handed Daniel a folder. She didn't know we were listening. Then Daniel opened the folder and smiled. After tonight, nobody can touch us. My husband stepped out of the shadows. You're wrong. Daniel froze. Emily turned around, and when she saw me standing there, she realized her biggest mistake. She had left behind the one thing that could destroy her, the original recording. The police entered the warehouse. Daniel tried to run. Emily started crying and begging for forgiveness, but I didn't say a word. That I ran straight to my daughter. That I held her tightly and whispered, Mommy's here. You're safe now. And for the first time in 12 years, our family finally knew the truth. That night, after everything was over, I sat beside my daughter while she slept. For 12 years, I had imagined the day her father would finally come back, but I never imagined he would return with tears in his eyes, carrying 12 years of regret. My husband stood at the doorway. Can I come in? He asked. That I nodded. That he walked inside and looked at our daughter. Tears rolled down his face. I missed everything, he whispered. Her first word. Her first day of school. Every birthday. I looked at him. You did. He lowered his head. I know I can't get those years back. And I don't expect you to forgive me just because I finally told you the truth. For the first time, I saw something different in his eyes, not excuses, not pride, regret. That I told him, I don't know if I can ever love you the way I once did. He nodded. I understand. Then I added, but if you truly want to be her father, you can start by earning her trust. He looked at our daughter and smiled through his tears that he didn't ask me to take him back, that he didn't ask for another chance at our marriage. He simply said, I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I deserve to be in her life. And that was when I realized something. Sometimes revenge isn't watching someone suffer. Sometimes revenge is surviving, becoming stronger, and refusing to let what they did destroy the person you become. 12 years ago, he walked away from his pregnant wife. 12 years later, he came back begging for forgiveness, but this time, I was the one who decided what happened next.